Why are there contradictions in the Bible? Did you know that there are millions of Christians around the world who are going crazy over biblical contradictions? I mean, it's true. There are pastors and parents and seminary students, Bible scholars and ordinary everyday believers, loads of people who spend their lives studying scripture, and they're all wrestling with this same impossible problem. Why are there contradictions in the Bible? Well, I have a fix for this problem, so stay tuned. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Late Nights with Dr. C. I'm Dr. Rufaro Celestin, and on today's show, we'll be starting a two-part conversation about biblical contradictions. Every day, loads of people spend their lives studying scripture, and they're all wrestling with this same impossible problem. Why are there contradictions in the Bible? Well, I have a fix for this problem, so let's get started. The Bible is divinely inspired. Fact. Therefore, the Bible is not supposed to have any errors in it. Fact. But there are contradictions in the Bible. Fact. What are we going to do with these three facts, and how did this happen? Well, after writing 4 books on the subject, I have a fix for this problem. Let's begin today by making something clear. When I talk about biblical contradictions, I'm not talking about minor text inconsistencies here. I'm not talking about issues like this Bible book said January and another Bible book said March, or this Bible book said in the 40th year, but another Bible book said in the 50th year. No. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say biblical contradictions, I'm talking about fundamental theological concepts that completely contradict one another. Let me give you 2 examples to show you what I'm talking about. Example number 1. Now we all know this one. The Apostle James wrote, "Faith without works is dead." Now that's a pretty clear statement, right? Faith alone is not enough for salvation. You need action. You need works. But then Paul wrote that we're saved by faith alone, not by works. Why? So that no one can boast. No one can be self-righteous. Now, these 2 statements completely contradict one another, and therefore they cannot both be true. It's not logically possible for them to both be true, and yet every Christian is taught to accept that both statements were divinely inspired, and therefore both statements are true. Example number 2. We have 4 Gospels. Matthew and John were apostles. They walked with Jesus, and they were specifically commissioned by him to bear witness. But Mark and Luke, they weren't apostles because Jesus never chose them, and there's no record that he ever commissioned them to write anything about his ministry. Yet we're supposed to give their Gospels equal weight with Matthew and John's Gospels, which are eyewitness testimonies. In fact, no, I'm actually wrong. They don't carry equal weight according to Bible scholars. We're actually supposed to give Mark and Luke's Gospels more weight than Matthew and John's Gospels. Can you believe this? And the prominence given to Mark's Gospel actually has a name. It's called Markan priority. This means that we're supposed to believe that Mark wrote his Gospel first, and then Matthew, the real apostle, and Luke had to copy their Gospels from him. That's why they call these 3 Gospels the Synoptic Gospels. But doesn't that sound strange to you? An eyewitness having to copy from a non-eyewitness? And what amazes me is that everyone's just trying to pretend like this is all normal, that everything is okay, but it's not okay, because the Bible is supposed to be inerrant. That means it's not supposed to have any mistakes in it. And why is this important? Because if the Bible was divinely inspired and God doesn't make mistakes, then what happened to our Bible? I mean, it's very hard to carry out our duty to teach the world what Jesus said. If the world keeps asking us, but why should I believe you? Your scriptures have mistakes. So we have a duty to unravel the mystery of biblical contradictions. Our pastors are burning out because they're spending more time trying to defend indefensible biblical contradictions, whereas they should be spending most of their time doing their main job, which is to help people live more fulfilling lives. Parents are losing credibility with their children. Children today are smart, and they will tell you exactly what's on their mind. They'll ask you logical questions like, if Paul never walked with Jesus, why does his opinion override Peter's? And when their parents don't have any rational answers for their questions, when these parents don't know what to say, what happens? We're losing the children and we're losing the parents. Folks, it's difficult. It's really difficult. Seminary students are having problems. They're having crisis of faith moments because as they begin to dig deep into their biblical studies, they're bouncing into New Testament canon inconsistencies that they cannot resolve. So they're asking themselves, is this really my calling? And don't even get me started on Christian apologists, the people whose job it is to defend the faith. They're so exhausted from all the intellectual gymnastics that they have to do every single day. They have to regurgitate the unbelievable theological explanations that Bible scholars have invented to try and resolve some of these biblical contradictions. I mean, you've heard, for example, of Q-source, right? Whenever biblical scholars can't explain something, what's their go-to? What's their default answer? Oh, I've got it. It's Q-source. Nobody knows who Q is, right? Nobody knows where he came from or where she came from. No. But trust me, whenever they can't explain something, it's Q-source. We have to stop this madness. And what's the cost of all this confusion? Brilliant, committed, and sincere believers are walking away from the faith. But it doesn't have to be this way. There's no reason why we can't have a rational theology, a logical theology, a faith and a theology that makes sense and has no contradictions. Because if we don't make this change, it's a problem. It's a real problem. You know, people have been discussing and complaining about these biblical contradictions for centuries. So I want you to stop. I want you to think to yourself, what have we been doing wrong? What if we haven't been able to solve this problem of biblical contradictions because we've been asking the wrong questions? What if we've been looking at this problem of biblical contradictions from the wrong perspective? How about if we did this for a change? Instead of asking, how do we make James and Paul agree about their faith versus works argument, how about if we started asking ourselves the question, why do they disagree in the first place? Maybe that's an important question. Of course, to go down this route requires something that's in very short supply these days, intellectual courage. Most people like being part of the pack. You know, they're not comfortable stepping outside the box on their own. They're not rocking the boat. They're not saying, hold on a sec, this is not making sense. No. Most people say, if this is what we've done for 2,000 years, then this is what we have to continue doing. But I'm not most people, and you're not most people, and we're calling this out now. This problem of biblical contradictions has to be dealt with once and for all. So I'm asking you today, what if we decide to take a different approach? What if these contradictions aren't problems to solve, but hear me on this, what if they're clues pointing us towards something we haven't understood correctly? Now that's an interesting thought. It brings me to the concept of paradigm shifts. You know what these are. But did you know that throughout history, the greatest discoveries have required paradigm shifts? It's true. Sometimes we just need to be willing to look at a problem from a fresh perspective in order to find a solution. Let me give you some quick examples. For centuries, really smart people were certain that the earth was flat. Like, don't sail too far or you'll fall off the earth kind of certainty that the earth was flat. The world had to wait until Pythagoras in 500 BC and then Aristotle in 330 BC separately devised mathematical theories to prove that the earth was actually a sphere. And then we had to wait another 1800 years until the Spanish sailor Ferdinand Magellan decided to get brave and circumnavigate the earth in early 1500s. He decided to set sail from Spain and keep sailing in one direction until hopefully they would come back to Spain. That's what it took to prove that the earth was a sphere. That's what it took before people were willing to change their minds about a flat earth. And don't think that they didn't have mutinies and rebellions on board when they were sailing, because they did. Some of the crew actually believed that they were going to fall off the earth and die if they sailed far enough from Spain. It took a willingness to look at the situation with a new perspective. It took a paradigm shift. Second example. Remember once upon a time, doctors used to do surgery with dirty hands and thought, yeah, that seems fine, until Louis Pasteur discovered the germ theory. Now you know all surgeons have to scrub before operating. We sterilize instruments before operations. That's just another example of a paradigm shift. Here's another example. Remember once upon a time, everyone was absolutely positive that the sun revolved around the earth until somebody called Copernicus was like, guys, no, I've got some awkward news to tell you. Yeah, you guessed it. Another paradigm shift. And here's the funny thing about being wrong. You don't even know you're wrong until suddenly you do know you're wrong. It's amazing. We have the truth. And then suddenly we get a better truth. And we call this better truth a paradigm shift. Sometimes breakthroughs don't come from finding new information. They come from having the courage to let go of previously treasured assumptions in order to solve big problems. So here's my question for you. What if we decided to look at our problem of biblical contradictions from a different perspective? Because we really need a paradigm shift. Next week, in part 2 of this conversation, I'm going to share something with you that's been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. Something that resolves these biblical contradictions completely. But it will require a paradigm shift on your part. Are you ready? In preparation for next week's episode, I want you to do something for me. Please think about your most distressing biblical contradiction. You know, the one that you'd like to get solved because it actually challenges your faith. And ask yourself this question. What if this contradiction is trying to tell me something important about the scriptures? Let's see what everybody is most bothered by. Post your biblical contradiction in the comments section. And of course, get ready. Because once you see what I'm going to tell you next week, you can't unsee it. Once you experience the clarity that comes from applying an ancient solution from early Christianity, going back to our same old theological gymnastics will never be possible again. Okay, that's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. This has been your host, Dr. C, and I'll see you next week on Late Nights with Dr. C. Goodbye.